Hello, I'm Demis Hellen, and I'm going to be guiding you through my track Kerosine. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the melody and chords and how I've structured that together. Episode 2, we'll be looking at the vocals and atmospheres. Episode 3 will be the percussion and the kick and bass. And then finally, we'll look at the mixing where I used pink noise. So in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the synth and the pads and the lead vox that I've created there from the lead vocal that is in the track. And it's a very simple concept in how I've built this track. I like to keep things, some things with a raw element in. So this is the piano in this case, and it comes from Hellen. I'm not using Hellen to its best of its abilities, but I'm just using it for its great sounds, and I've got the live grand loaded, and that's all that's happening from there. But Hellen is far more capable of other things. But with Hellen, we've just got a piano line here. So let's just have a quick listen to this section here. You can see it's a very simple idea. There's nothing really much happening. A little bit of whole reverb coming from Hellen direct, I think, but that's just how it comes standard, and I just like the sound of it. It fit with the vibe. I might have turned it down a smidge, but that is about it. And then we've just got this EQ cut off here, so when it drops into the main part of the track, it just sort of like pushes into the background. Very similar to simulating the lid closed. So back to this section here. The processing that I've done on here is just really to tidy up the lower frequencies and just tidy up with the compression just to control some of the rogues that come through with that. So let's just have a quick look. We've got Roomworks on here, just providing some more scale to the room. Sort of a medium-sized room with this, but I'm using it really to control the lows and the highs that come through with that. We don't want it too bright and we don't want it too low. And you can see I've pushed that mix just a little bit further to saturate that sound. So let's have a listen to that off. So you can hear there's just a little splash of reverb at the end. So if I just play a couple of notes here, turn it off. You can hear I've added some of the brightness in there, but it's very controlled in how I do that. So that goes through a frequency as well, which is just really attenuating some frequencies that I want it to really pull out of the mix. And you can see a low and a high roll there. That is the same roll, by the way, at the high. That is not really doing anything until I automate that in at this point. And you can see we do a nice gentle fade at a 6 dB high cut. And then we have the compressor, and you can hear what this is going to be doing is just gluing the reverb and the piano together. So it just sort of makes it a little bit more seamless, and rather than just it sounding like reverb is just stuck on the top. And just a little tip for all compression as a whole, so not just pianos, make sure your auto makeup gain is off and that you're doing this manually, so you're matching the input with the output, so then you can hear exactly what the compressor is doing and if it's adding or taking away from your mix, and then you can use the auto makeup or make up the gain yourself to the level that you want it to be at. So where the real magic happens on top of the piano is from Retrolog, and I've created a pad/synth preset that is sort of mimicking the same tonal quality as the piano, so they sort of work together and blend. And I like to sort of support pianos in my sort of compositions. Sometimes I use higher sort of pluckier sounds that really complement the higher notes, but because this one's more subdued and it's got like quite a laid back low feeling, I've gone for a more paddy sound on this one. So let's just have a quick listen to that. So at first it might not sound like a piano or something in a similar tone, but when you place the piano underneath, you get this lovely wash of synth pads over the top, especially when the filter starts opening, but at the same time it's got quite a lot of body that supports what the piano is trying to do. And to quickly guide you through, we've got two multi-layers, so providing some detuned voices, a single layer here acting as a sub on a triangle. Could have used the sub oscillator, didn't use that one. And then you can see I've just blended these oscillators as so in that mix. It goes through a low pass filter, so just to sort of like take off the top, reduce those highs and make sure that everything is sort of fitting with the piano and the vibe of the track. Slight envelope on there, and you can see the shape here, so there's a bit of like a pluck coming through, just a little one, just to give it a little bit more dynamic and air about the sound. And then where the real magic happens is using the resonator in the effects, and this is where you get that more integrated sound with the piano rather than it sounding like a synth sat on the top. So the resonator is a really good feature for Retrolog because you can simulate so many tones and timbres by passing it through this. You can see I've just used a low pass 2 preset there and then just tweaked it to how it needed to be for the track. Just using your ears to sort of match it with the piano. It's going through a chorus just to give it a little bit more width, just texture, rather than sort of stereo width that you can use it for and more voices, just to add a little bit of texture on the bottom. And then the reverb is really just there as a sound design reverb. The difference between having a reverb on your inserts or a send track is it's to give it space. Whereas the reverb within the synth, I tend to use a sound designing reverb where we sort of give it a space, but it's more to affect the tonal quality of it or the little bit of width on it. There's all different reasons why you'd use it, but I've done it for width in this case. So if you listen to me turn the reverb on and off, you'll hear it sort of shrinks into the middle and then expands back out when we turn it on. So you can hear that reverb is sort of shaping the sound a little bit, not too much, but you can hear that width really does come out in there by using a mixture of the room size and the blend there. So with that in mind, we've got a little bit of a effects chain there. It's really just to tidy up some rogue frequencies, especially in the lows. We've got a couple of peaks that really come through and crush the mix and affects the compression as well because it's going to start reacting before it even happens. So I'm using a collection of warmer compressors just to provide a little bit of extra texture to the sound on top of what Retrolog's already doing. We've got a bit of tremolo and chorus on there to give it a little bit of movement and texture. And then finally an effects modulator here, providing some sidechain using volume. So it's volume shaping, simulating a sidechain. And then a filter also doing the same thing, which is a high pass filter. So it's sort of removing the lows out of the first portion of the signal where the kicks are hitting, just to clean it up a little bit. And it is very, very tame on how I'm doing that. And you can see the mix is down at 0 at the moment, but once that's blended in, it just gets some of those lower frequencies that I decided to keep in the track out of the way for when the kick and the bass are actually operating together. And then finally, we have the pad sampler here. So this is using the sampler, and all I've done is taken the vocal line. So if we just jump down to the vocal track here, and this first vocal line here. So I've taken that whole sample and time stretched that out to an extremely long length, and then I have sampled sections for that voice and Atmos section, but also put that into the sampler to create an instrument out of it. So a quick look at this, the time stretch sample is in there. It's going to be quicker at the top end of the keyboard and slower at the bottom, just like a normal sampler, so you can get some nice breathy tones at the low end. Or you can get some sparkly sounds near the top end. Now this is in the correct key for the track. It's mapped on the keyboard correctly. The only thing I had to do, it was up by 2 semitones out of key with the way I'd sampled it. So I just brought it down 2. So then it becomes in the correct key and you can play it on your keyboard. So the reason for this is to make a melody that sits on the top but fits tonally with the vocals and the atmospheres and just sort of brings that top end of the chords to life. So let's play this whole section without it, and then I'll just bring it in. You can hear the tonal difference. So it is definitely missing something. It needs that melodic hook on the top end just to support it. So you can hear it adds a real character to the track, and to be honest, I think between that and the bottle that we're going to have a quick look at in a second is sort of the defining parts of this song, makes it nice and unique. And then the vocal processing, bit of stereo delay, bit of room works on there, chopping some of the lows out, bit of studio chorus to thicken it up and give it some texture and just bring it a little bit more to life. And then finally a bit of EQ just to control some of the side detail, because obviously with being a vocal and having a lot of reverb processing on there, it sort of falls apart in a mono mix. So just to bring that back into the middle and leave the top end expanded. And then that is everything. That all goes through a bus track as well. So if we just quickly look at that, bit of room works on there again, really just to sort of flood the whole thing and gel it all together. Try not to do it too much. You can see I've got quite a rigorous dampening and input filter section there. So I'm really sort of honing in, and you can see it's only on a 2.5 second reverb time as well. Just there to gel it together for when it goes through the compressor. And you can see about 2 dB, it's really just gelling it all together, bringing the reverb out, blending all of those samples together. And then finally, a bit of frequency on there again, doing roughly the same thing, rolling some of the lows out, and you can see a bit of stereo rollout as well. And if we listen to that on and off, let's just have this soloed. So it's very subtle in how I'm doing that, but you can hear, if you just listen to that again on headphones, you will hear that it breathes a bit more life into it, just makes it inflated a little bit more in the track. Sounds nice. So before we finish up, I'm just going to jump into the vocal and atmos section, because the bottle is located in here that I sampled. In fact, it's not, it's located in percussion. That's correct. So you can see here we've got the 2 bottle loops. These overlap, so I can keep the reverb and delay that is already on that loop. I made the loop here at the top so you can see this bottle lane, and we have some velocity values just to get that groove. Obviously a little bit of quantizing on there as well to add some swing to the track. And what that bottle loop then does is when I've bounced that down, I've got a little bit of a tail, so the reverb and the delay that I put on previously to it will come through, and then obviously I can start processing that as an audio file. And I like working with samples. That's the reason I did it. So let's have a look at what this sounds like. So both loops here, I've got exactly the same presets on. So that's fading in at that point. So I'm just going to bring it over to this section over here. Let's loop that back to there. And what's happening on here is I'm putting some Roomworks SE on. I really wanted to keep this simple, and I like SE for really quick and easy results. No low level, a lot of high level coming through, low mix and sort of high diffusion, but it's more about the reverb time there to bring it into context. They both then go through the effects modulator, applying some sidechain imitation using volume shaping and the high pass shaping that I showed you before, a little bit more intense with this one. Very simple on the EQ. This is just providing it as a filter. I like using EQs as filter cutoffs a lot better than filters sometimes. And then a brick wall limiter to act as a clipper essentially. So it's just clipping the tops off to keep that mix nice and steady. And I've just brought it right down. You can see it's about -4 dB there. Might be a little bit too much clipping for some, but the effect that it sort of delivers at the end sounds really nice. So that is the way I like it. So there we have it. Hopefully the insight into how I program and sort of process everything in the synth and pads department has given you some ideas for your own tracks, and hopefully opens some doors into the plugins that Cubase offers to get that final result. And with that said, I've been Demis Hellen, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.